want to reiterate what David said. It is always good to be together, and there is always something special about Sunday night. So thank you for being here. Let me before we get it, let me do a straw poll before we get started. How many of you got one of these? Yeah. How many of you got one of these with you? How many of you? All right. How many of you will turn back around to your house to get it if you forgot it? Yep, all right. That's what I figured. How many of you are embarrassed at how tethered you are to this thing? Yeah. Yeah. All right. Good. Yeah. I was sitting in the office, and from time to time I like to do an object lesson, and I was thinking, looking around, what can we do? And I looked down, I was like, And the craziest thought came across my mind. What if God had a phone? Would it be an iPhone? But let's say that God had a phone. What would it be like? I'm just up here to show you pictures of my kids. What would God's phone be like? What would it look like? How would it act? So let's explore. Explore that idea for just a few moments this evening and the time that we get to spend together. You remember a few years ago, it seems it was about the time that the iPhone really started to take off and it became more and more popular. I think we're up to 15 or something like that, maybe around 3 or 4. There was an ad that ran, and the ad, it was always, there's an app for that. You remember that? You remember those commercials? There's an app for that. And I don't know how many applications you have on your phone, but at church camp this past summer, I was talking to our kids and I said, and we were talking about a particular Bible lesson. I said, now let's make an application to us. I said, do y'all know what an application is? And they said, yeah. Like, what is it? Something you download on your phone. No. I don't have very many apps, and I try not to have very many apps. But there is an app for anything on God's phone, right? There is an app for anything that you want. On God's phone, if you're able to look at God's phone, He, on His phone, has an app for that. Already there, already downloaded, already been used. All right? Follow me. In Ecclesiastes, the whole book, the gist of Ecclesiastes is, it's already been done, right? Vanity of vanity, all is vanity. If you're bored and you're looking for an interesting study in the book of Ecclesiastes, walk through the book of Ecclesiastes looking word by word, reading it word for word, and underline or highlight every time you see the word vanity. Vanity. Over and over and over again, the idea of vanity is there. But in chapter 1, the idea that there is nothing new, it's right there. Ecclesiastes chapter 1, read it with me, beginning in verse 9 and in verse 10, it says this. What has been done? Solomon, wisest man that's ever lived. What has been done is what will be. Another way to say that is history repeats itself. What has been done is what will be, and what has been done is what will be done. And there is nothing new under the sun. Is there a thing of which it is said, see, this is new? It has already been done in the ages before us. I don't know about you, but I find a lot of comfort in that. I find a lot of comfort in everything that we think that we have come up with. It's already been done. Somebody has already done all of this. What has been done is what will be, and what we think is new is what it's already been done. When you think about God's app for that, God's got an app for anything that you're going through. According to this passage, it's already been done before. Let's say, for instance, you're going through some incredible loss in your life. You're experiencing a life-altering loss. Maybe it's, as someone said, nobody ever needs to bury their child. Maybe you're at the point where you have to bury your child now. Maybe it's that loss. Did you know that there are several Bible characters who had to bury their children? There's an app for that. Or maybe you are at this mountaintop moment where you are experiencing God like never before. That you are just on fire and there is nothing in this world that could stop you. You know, there's passages in the Bible and events in the Bible that speak to something like that. Do you remember the shouting and the yelling that went on as 300 surrounded an army that could not be counted with torches and pots? And they screamed at the top of their lungs, and the Lord won a great victory. Or the mountaintop moment when the little boy went down into the valley to pick up 5 smooth stones. And then, subsequently, the Philistine army fled for their life. Mountaintop moments. You know, there's nothing that has been done that hasn't already been done. Or maybe you are in this moment, you are experiencing a distress, and it is a distress that no one has ever experienced. Maybe it's the rejection of your children. Maybe you're going through a time in your life when your children have not only rejected you, but rejected the God that you believe in. Did you know that that has been done? Did you know that King David was chased out of his kingdom on a couple of occasions? Because his children hated him? Or maybe you're going through some agony that you don't think even God Himself would know. Have we forgotten the sweat that became like great drops of blood in the garden? See, there's an app for that. You look at God's phone, it's already been done. Already been there, already done it, and look what? It's right here written down for you. Isn't that encouraging? That just to know that there is nothing in this life that we could ever experience that God hasn't already told us about. Well, God hasn't told us how to control these phones. God didn't know about the internet. Well, I think God knew it was coming. Or God didn't know about cars and all those things. And you're right. Those things weren't around when Jesus was here, weren't around when the Bible was here. But all those things, in one form or another, they did exist. And people did still get angry at the messenger from time to time. So on God's phone, first, all right? First thing on God's phone is that God's got an app for that. You got a problem, you got something that you're working on, you just flip over in God's app and it's already there. Did you know in your phone? All right, I'm going to blow some of your minds. Listen to me. In your phone, you can download an application that you can take a picture of a leaf and it will tell you what type of tree you're looking at. Isn't that crazy? Or you can You can tell your phone to listen to a song. Did you know that? You can tell your phone to listen to a song, and it will tell you the name of that song. Isn't that crazy? Did you know that we have a God that knows more than Apple ever could? We know a God that knows it all, omniscient. On God's phone, He's got an app for that. Have you ever, and I'm the worst about this, but all right, if you've got your phone, show me your phone, all right? I'll take 3 seconds. You can get your phone out, and then you better put it right back up. Pay attention. Show me your phone. 1, 2, 3. Yep, they're all pretty handy, aren't they? I gave you 3 seconds. Here it is, right there. Have you ever been, and I do this, like I said, I'm the worst at this. You go to church, all right, and you're sitting through church, and you remember all of a sudden, you know what, I need to turn that on silent so that nobody calls me when I'm at church. And then Tuesday rolls around, and you remember, oh yeah, my phone's still on silent. I need to, then Wednesday, put it back, and it stays until Friday. God's phone's always on ringer. I've had people that have called me and they've said, man, I've been trying to get a hold of you for a while. And I'm like, sorry, get used to it. But God's phone's always on ringer. That is incredible. When you think about 7 billion people in the world, and we're growing, 7 billion people in the God still has His phone, right? You're with me, on ringer. That anytime that you call God, anytime you send God a text message, right? He's right there. Short little message to God, God gets it. And it's not, wait just a minute, let me get back to you. Or that message, have y'all set that up yet? Where your phone will reply, just a minute, I'm driving. Can I call you later? Y'all seen that? I'm blowing some of your minds. It's incredible. God doesn't have that. God's never too busy, is He? He doesn't have, hang on just a minute, I'm in the middle of something. I'll get back to you in a minute. Or I'm on a phone call, can I call you later? Look at this. A few passages with me in the book of Psalms, and we're going to be in the book of Psalms a lot for some obvious reasons, but look at Psalm 17. 17th Psalm, verse 6, and it says this, I call upon you, for you will answer me. O God, incline your ear to me, hear my words. I will call upon you, for you will answer me. O God. Fascinating, isn't it? To me, it is when you think about the simple statement, I will call upon you because you will answer me. I'm going to call on God, right? I'm going to give God a call, and He's going to answer me. Oh, God, who are you calling? You're calling God Almighty, and God Almighty is going to answer you. Hear my words. Isn't that encouraging? God's phone is always on ringer. Look at another one with me. A few chapters, Psalms later in the 86th Psalm. Look at a couple of verses here. Look at 1 through 3 with me. Incline your ear, O Lord, and answer me, for I am poor and needy. Preserve my life, for I am godly. Save your servant who trusts in you, because you are my God. Be gracious to me, O Lord, for to you do I cry all the day. Give ear, verse 6 and verse 7. Give ear, O Lord, to my prayer. Listen to my plea for grace. In the day of my trouble, I call upon you, for you answer me. And you may be thinking to yourself, John, that's verse 6 and verse 7. You see it again. John, that's David. David was so important to God, and he played such a pivotal role in the plan, the scheme of God in redeeming humanity. But let me ask you a question. Does David hold more value to God than you do? Or does God love David any more than he loves you? I think cognitively we can all affirm that. God doesn't love David any more than he loves me. But sometimes it's hard to grasp, isn't it? Preserve my life, for I am godly. I am like God. Be gracious to me, O Lord, for to you do I cry all the day. Have you ever had conversations with someone and started looking for an escape? You ever been there? You're having a conversation. You are face to face with somebody, and then you start looking around the room like, all right, I got to get out of here. This person is driving me nuts. God never does that. When I am in trouble, to you I turn. You will answer me. God's never looking for an escape. God's ringer's always on. One more. A few verses later, or a few Psalms later, in 116. 1 and 2. Look at what it says here. I love the Lord because he has heard my voice and my pleas for mercy. Because he inclined his ear to me, therefore I will call on him as long as I live. Now, I'm not sure how many ears, big air quotes, God has. But if you let this one sink in, it should hit you square between the eyes. Look at what it says one more time. My voice, my pleas. He has inclined his ears to me. It's almost like this, okay? And I'm not saying it's exactly like this by any stretch of the imagination, but it's almost like this. You remember, all right, old Batman. We're talking about Adam West Batman shows. There was this designated phone. You remember? There was a designated phone where we could call Batman if we needed him, right? And if you ever got in trouble, you just pick up the phone and Batman, hey, he's right there. That's easy. Almost like that. When you read Psalm 116, verse 1 and verse 2, it's almost like you have a designated phone line to God. He has inclined his ears to me. He is listening specifically to me. He's heard my voice. He's heard my plea. That's pretty cool. God's phone's always on ringer. Guess what? He's got an app for that. This is the only time I could ever be on my phone up here and nobody would say anything about it. He's got an app for that. Always on ringer. Point number 3 about God's phone, he's got his own calendar. How many people, you've got your calendar in your phone? Anything that you've got planned, it goes right here. How many people use that? Yeah, I use it quite a bit. It goes right there. God's got his own calendar. And let me tell you, it doesn't look like mine. It doesn't look like mine at all. God's got his own plans. He's got his own way of doing things. He's got his own dates. Sometimes they're hard to figure out. But when you figure it out, it all makes sense. A few more passages. Go back to the 90th Psalm. Go back a few. Not very many. 90th Psalm. Look at a few of these passages, a few of these verses here, starting in verse 4. This one might sound familiar to you. Peter recalls this one as he's writing 2 Peter chapter 3 as we know it. Verse 4, for 1,000 years in your sight are but as yesterday when it is past, or as a watch in the night. That's God's calendar right there. It's like 1,000 years, it's just like yesterday. You know, time flies. Keep going in the 90th Psalm. A lot about time here. Look at verse 10. The years of our life are 70, or even by reason of strength, 80. Yet their span is but toil and trouble. They are soon gone, and we fly away. So you read verse 4. You read verse 4, and verse 4 tells you in the sight of God, 1,000 years is nothing. It's as yesterday. And then you come to verse 10. Your calendar and God's calendar may not line up because our life, even if we're lucky, we may make it to 80. And then we're gone. Verse 12 and verse 13 and verse 14. Therefore, here's the conclusion. The conclusion of these. So teach us to number our days. Here's the reason. That we may get a heart of wisdom. Return, O Lord, how long? Have pity on your servant. Satisfy us in the morning with your steadfast love, that we may rejoice and be glad all of our days. Teach us to number our days, that we may gain wisdom. There is wisdom in knowing this life is just pretty short. In the grand scheme of eternity, look at it. We got 70 years, 80 if we're lucky. We got 80 years here if we're real lucky, and we've got all eternity in front of that. Which one would you live for? Teach us to number our days. Teach us to calculate which one is most important. This life, 80 years if we're good, if we're lucky, or days that can't be counted? Because there is no end. Teach us to number our days. And then he moves from that in verse 13 with, how long? How long, oh God? Teach us to number our days. How long? God, give us your calendar. Tell us what's going on. Have pity on us. Why? We're just here for a short little time. Have pity on us. But that reminds me, and maybe it reminds you, of Habakkuk. My favorite verse in Habakkuk. Chapter 1, verse 2 and verse 5. Be a good little footnote for there in the 90th Psalm. Look at this, Habakkuk. Verse 2. O Lord, Habakkuk says, O Lord, how long shall I cry for help, and you will not hear? Or cry to you violence, and you will not save? Have you been there? Have you been crying out to God? God, how long? How long do I have to cry out? And you're not going to do a thing about it. Then verse 5, God's response. Look among the nations. Wonder and be astounded, for I am doing a work in your days that you would not believe if told. God's calendar is a little bit different than ours. And frequently, at least myself, I find myself crying out to God, God, how long? You will not answer. And then I'm reminded of God's answer. Just look. Even if I told you, you wouldn't. I know many of you have stories of your life, real memories that you look back retrospectively and you see how God has worked. Undeniable. There's only one reason it's worked out the way that it has, and the Lord's hand is in it. But in those stories, if yours is like mine, it didn't work out the way that you planned it, did it? It didn't work out the way that you had laid it all out for God. Do this, and then after you get done with that, I want you to do this and this and this. God does His own thing. He's on His own calendar. Your calendar here, it's not the same as God's calendar, thankfully. It always works out for the better. Here's the other thing about God and God's phone. God's got all the contacts. People call me, and I'm sure they call you too. And this is what we call junk calls. You get those? Junk calls. I get calls and my phone will pop up and say, might be spam. Pretty good little warning. I have in my phone 224 contacts. I'll tell you, I don't know very many people. And some of these I need to get rid of. 7 billion people in the world now. I don't know how many there has been in the past. But I do know that God knows every one of them. That every single one of those people that God knows, that He cares for. That doesn't make any sense. My graduating class was roughly the same size as my contact list. Some of those people I had spoken 5 or maybe 10 words to in 4 years. But the verse that we're about to read blows my mind. Because when we read what we read in Matthew chapter 10 and Luke's account here in Luke chapter 12, God is an amazing God. Look at what it says. I'll get there. Are not 5 sparrows sold for 2 pennies, and not one of them is forgotten before God? Verse 7, why? Even the hairs of your head are all numbered. Fear not, you are of more value than many sparrows. Did you know that you are on God's contact list? Scroll down, and not only, here's a nifty thing about these contacts. I don't have very many of them like this. You can click on this guy, and it will tell you has a place where even his address, you can put in his address. Isn't that crazy? And say, hey, this is Austin. Austin's not here. Hey, go to Austin's house. And that phone will take you straight to Austin's house if I knew Austin's house number. Here's the thing. God even knows the hairs on your head. Are not 2 sparrows sold for a penny, and not one of them is lost before God? You mean that little sparrow that I shot with my BB gun when I was 12 years old. First bird I ever killed. God knew. So insignificant. God knew. On God's phone, not only does He have your number and your name, He's got every detail about your life. He knows everything that's going on with you. God cares about everything. God cares. Why? Why does God care about someone as insignificant as me? And I'll tell you why. This is in the book of John, chapter 3. Jesus having a conversation with Nicodemus. Verse 16 says, "For God so loved." We could stop right there, couldn't we? But for God so loved the world that He gave His only Son. That's why God cares. That's why God cares what you're doing. That's why God cares if you're here or whether you're not. God cares because you're on God's contact list. God so loved the world that He gave His only Son, that whoever believes in Him should not perish but have eternal life. For God did not send His Son into the world to condemn the world, but in order that the world might be saved through Him. I'll tell you why God has made it His business to know your business, because God sent His Son to die for your business, your sin. That's why God cares. On God's phone, it's pretty interesting. He's got an app for whatever you're going through. It's always on ringer. He'll always answer. His calendar, don't get me wrong, His calendar is not like our calendar or my calendar. He doesn't do things on my time. But He cares about you. You're on His contact list. And He knows you. He knows what you need. If you need Him tonight, I want to encourage you to come.